My dad demanded everything in court. The judge, his longtime ally, mocked my case and called me naive. I whispered 2 words. His face went pale. The room went silent. The courtroom smelled of old wood and something sour. Maybe sweat, maybe fear. I stood at the table, clutching the edges of the document folder so tightly that my fingers tingled. Judge Barton Cranshaw looked down at me, undisguised mockery in his eyes. "Miss Stedman," he drawled, flipping through my complaint as if it were a menu at a cheap diner. "Do you really believe your claims have any legal merit?" My lawyer, Daniel Warner, nervously flipped through the papers. He was a good lawyer, but in this room, all the rules had changed. Crenshaw and my father had known each other for 30 years. They played golf every Saturday. I had seen the photos in my father's office. Ralph Stedman sat across the table with his arms crossed over his chest. His suit was perfectly pressed, his tie was striped, and his gray temples were barely visible under the fluorescent lights. He didn't look at me. He just sat there, confident of his victory, waiting for this farce to end. "Your Honor," Daniel began, but Crenshaw waved his hand. "I've read the documents. This is an attempt by a daughter to sue for something she voluntarily gave to her father after the merger of the companies. Naivety or greed, I don't know, but it's definitely not a case for this court." The word naivety hit me like a slap in the face. I had always been naive. I had always believed that if you worked honestly, if you did everything right, people would see it. Even my father, especially my father. I remembered the day I was 8. My mother had just died. Cancer, quick and cruel. My father didn't cry at the funeral. He stood by the coffin, holding my hand, and looked somewhere above the heads of the people. I asked, "Dad, where did Mom go?" He squeezed my hand even tighter and replied, "I don't know, me, but now all we have is work. Remember that." And I remembered. Stedman Industrial Solutions became my home. Huge offices with panoramic windows, the smell of new paper, the hum of phone calls, numbers on screens. Now, my father ran it all like a general, and I learned to be a good soldier. From the age of 20, I worked at the company, first as a logistics manager, calculating the supply of parts for the industrial cleaning systems our company produced. It was a boring, monotonous process, but I did it perfectly. After 2 years, I was appointed head of the department. I managed a team of 15 people, optimized routes, and reduced costs. My father nodded approvingly at meetings, but never said, "Well done." He just nodded. I thought that was normal, that this was how it should be. And then I turned 28. I was sitting in my office looking at reports and suddenly realized I was suffocating. Every decision I made had to go through my father. Every idea, and then approval, verification, doubt. He didn't trust me. He never trusted me. I went to his office and said, "I want to start my own company." He looked up from his documents and raised his eyebrow in surprise. "Your own?" "Yes, the same profile, industrial cleaning systems, but with a focus on ecology, new technologies, innovations." He smiled, not kindly, the way adults smile when a child says something silly. "Me, you'll fail in 6 months. You have no experience, no connections, no money." "I have everything you taught me." He was silent, then waved his hand. "Do what you want, but when you fail, don't come asking for help." I created clear flow systems. I took out a loan, hired 3 engineers and 1 accountant. The first year was hell. I slept 4 hours a day, ate sandwiches at my desk, forgot what a day off looked like, but the company survived. In the second year, we got our first big contract. In the third, we turned a profit. My father didn't call. He wasn't interested. I sometimes saw him at industry conferences. He would walk by and nod as if to a distant acquaintance. And then he suddenly called, "Me, we need to talk." We met at a restaurant, an expensive one with white tablecloths and waiters in tuxedos. He ordered a steak. I ordered a salad. He looked at me, and there was something unusual in his eyes, almost respect. "You've done a good job," he said. "Clear Flow is growing." I was wrong. I almost dropped my fork. "What?" "I propose merging the companies. Stedman and Clear Flow. Together we will be stronger. You will manage the environmental division. I will manage traditional production. Partners." Partners. The word sounded so sweet. I always wanted to be his partner, not a subordinate, not a daughter who needed to be controlled. A partner. "On one condition," I said. "I retain full control over my department. Budget, decisions, hiring." He held out his hand. "It's a deal." We signed the agreement a week later. The lawyers checked everything, and it was all clean. I moved with my team to the Stedman headquarters. I was given 2 floors, brand new furniture, access to all resources. The first month was perfect. The second month, my father began to take an interest in my decisions. He would come into meetings and ask questions. I thought it was normal, that he just wanted to be in the loop. The third month, he blocked my budget for new equipment. He said, "Now is not the time for spending." I argued with him and proved I was right. He gave in, but he had the same smile on his face as he did in the restaurant, a cold smile. In the 4th month, one of my best engineers, Marcus, suddenly quit. He went to work for a competitor. I found out by accident. My father had offered him double the salary in his department. When I came to find out, he said, "It's business, me. Nothing personal, nothing personal." Then everything started to fall apart even faster. My decisions were blocked at board meetings. My contracts were accidentally delayed for signing. My supplies were lost in paperwork. Within a year, I had only 10% of my real influence left. I tried to fight back. I convened internal committees, wrote complaints, sought support from other directors. But my father had been here for 30 years. He had connections, money, respect. And then he sued. He claimed that I had violated the terms of the merger, that I had acted to the detriment of the company, that Clear Flow should be completely absorbed by Stedman, and that I should be dismissed from my position. And here I am, standing in this courtroom, where the judge is his friend, where the lawyers are on his side, where even the security guard at the door looks at me with pity. "Miss Stedman," Crenshaw leaned forward, "do you have anything to say in your defense? Anything other than emotions?" I opened my mouth, but the words stuck in my throat. Daniel put his hand on my shoulder, squeezing encouragingly. My father still wasn't looking at me, and then I remembered. Grandpa, Alden Stedman, the founder of the company. He hadn't been in the country for 30 years, living somewhere in Switzerland, but he was still formally the main shareholder. I wrote him a letter a month ago. I didn't expect a reply, but he answered. I took a deep breath and said, quietly but clearly, "Grandpa disagrees." Silence. Crenshaw froze. Daniel looked at me in surprise. And my father finally turned around. His face turned pale. "What did you say?" he hissed. Daniel opened the folder I had given him that morning. An official document. Seal, signature, date. A video message on a flash drive. "Your Honor," Daniel said, confidence returning to his voice. "We have an official statement from Alden Stedman, the founder of the corporation. He conducted an independent audit and found violations of internal corporate procedures by Ralph Stedman. In particular, the reduction of Mia Stedman's rights and powers took place without the approval of the Board of Founders, which is contrary to the company's charter." Crenshaw was silent. His face gradually turned red. My father stood up abruptly from the table, his chair scraping across the floor. "That's impossible," he said hoarsely. "Alden hasn't interfered in the company's affairs for 20 years. He interferes when he sees fit," I replied, "and he believes you have broken the rules." Crenshaw coughed and adjusted his glasses. "The meeting is adjourned for 2 weeks. I need time to study the new evidence." My father stood looking at me. His lips were pressed into a thin line. He didn't say a word. He just turned and walked to the exit without looking back. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Daniel smiled. We won the first round. But I didn't feel victorious. I looked at the door behind which my father had disappeared and realized that the war was just beginning. My grandfather's auditors worked quietly but thoroughly. Over the course of a week, they turned over all the company's internal documents, checked every decision, every signature. I didn't see them. They arrived early in the morning when the office was still empty and left late at night. But the result of their work now lay on Judge Crenshaw's desk, and his face no longer expressed dismissive confidence. The hearing took place 2 weeks later. My father sat at his desk, not looking in my direction. His lawyer, a man in his 50s with refined manners, leafed through the papers with the look of a man who knew he had lost. Crenshaw cleared his throat. After careful consideration of the documents provided by Alden Stedman's representatives, the court finds that the reduction of Mia Stedman's powers was in violation of internal corporate procedures. The board of directors' decision to restrict her rights was not approved by the board of founders, which is a mandatory requirement under the company's charter. Ralph Stedman's lawsuit regarding the acquisition of Clearflow Systems is dismissed. I felt no triumph, just emptiness. My father stood up when Crenshaw finished reading the decision and left the room without even turning around. Daniel squeezed my hand. We won, but that's not all, is it? I nodded. We won the battle, but not the war, and I knew I had to act quickly. A week later, I filed a counterclaim compensation for damages, restoration of status, return of all powers that belonged to me under the contract. My father tried to fight, but my grandfather's documents were too convincing. The court ruled in my favor. The company effectively split in two. I ran Clearflow Division, an innovative department that dealt with environmental technologies, new developments, and young clients. My father remained at the helm of the Stedman Industrial Division, traditional manufacturing, old trusted clients, conservative methods, 2 floors in one building, 2 teams that hardly ever crossed paths. The first month was surprisingly calm. I held meetings, met with clients, and approved budgets. My people worked with enthusiasm. They knew that now no one would have to report to my father. Among them was Tyler Rourke, an environmental engineer, 30 years old, with red hair and freckles on his face. He had joined the company a year ago, before all this commotion, and had always been a quiet, diligent worker. But now that everything had changed, he unexpectedly became the one who supported me. Not with words, but with his simple presence. We often stayed late at the office, sorting through reports or discussing new projects. He would bring coffee from the vending machine, terribly bitter, but hot. Sometimes we would just sit in silence, each at our own desk, and that silence was comfortable. I didn't think of it as anything more. Just the warmth I had been missing all my life. But the calm couldn't last forever. It all started with little things. The printers were running out of paper more often than usual, and deliveries were delayed by several days. The coffee machine on our floor broke down, and for some reason the repairs took 2 weeks. The elevator accidentally got stuck between floors with 3 of my employees inside. They were rescued an hour later, but the meetings were canceled. I chalked it up to coincidence, although I was already starting to get suspicious. Then things got more serious. I was about to sign a contract with a plastic recycling plant. $2 million, a big project for 3 years. The negotiations lasted a month, and everything was going perfectly. The client, Roger Billings, the owner of the plant, told me on the phone, "Mia, you've convinced me. We'll sign on Friday." On Friday, he didn't show up. His assistant called and said they were backing out of the deal. No explanation. I didn't understand what had happened until I ran into Roger at an industry conference a week later. He tried to avoid me, but I caught up with him at the exit. "Roger, what happened?" He said, "Why did you back out?" He shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot. "Mia, I'm sorry, but I was offered better terms. Stedman Industrial gave me a 20% discount. I couldn't turn it down." 20%. That meant my father was working at a loss just to take my client away from me. I stood there watching Roger disappear into the crowd, feeling everything inside me go cold. Tyler said to me that evening, "He won't stop. Do you understand that?" I understood. The next blow was a joint project. We were working on modernizing an old factory. Some of the equipment was supplied by my department, some by my father's. It was one of the few areas where we still had to work together. The client was expecting results in 2 months, and everything was going according to schedule, until my father's department suddenly delayed the delivery, first for a week, then another. The client began to get nervous. I called my father, wrote letters. He did not respond. I contacted his managers. They shrugged their shoulders and talked about technical problems. The project fell through. The client filed a complaint with the board of directors, accusing Clearflow Division of incompetence. I tried to explain that the delay was not my fault, but it looked like I was just shifting the blame. My father sat silently at the board meeting with a look of sympathy on his face, and that was the worst part. Tyler found me in my office that evening, sitting with my head down on the desk. "Mia," he said quietly, "you can't go on like this." "I know." "Then what are you going to do?" I lifted my head and looked at him. His eyes were serious, without pity or sympathy. Just a question. "I'm going to leave." He raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Leave? The company?" "No, leave here. This building, set up my own office, cut all ties with my father's department." The idea had been maturing in me for weeks, but only now did I say it out loud. If we stay here in the same building, my father will always find a way to hurt us. But if we move, if we become completely autonomous, he will lose his leverage. "It will cost money," Tyler said. "I know, but it's the only way out." I started looking for a place the very next day. Most of the options were too expensive or too small. But after a week, I found what I needed. An old workshop on the outskirts of town that used to belong to a furniture factory. It was a large space with high ceilings, big windows, and empty walls. The perfect place to renovate into a modern office. I bought it for half the market price. The owner wanted to get rid of it quickly. I hired builders, a designer, and bought new furniture. My team was initially skeptical about the idea of moving, but when they saw the sketches of the future office, their mood changed. It was our space, without the past, without my father's pressure. The move took a month. Renovation, equipment setup, server transfer. I didn't tell my father in advance. I just sent him an official letter a week before the move. He didn't respond. The moving day fell on a Saturday. The whole team worked on it. 23 people, including me. Trucks brought furniture. Installers set up computers. And a designer placed plants in the corners. By evening, everything was ready. I stood by the window of my new office on the 3rd floor, looking out at the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in many months, I felt something like peace. "Now I'm alone," I whispered. "For real." I heard footsteps behind me. Tyler approached, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said, handing me one. I took it and smiled. For the first time in months. "Thank you." We stood silently, looking out the window. The coffee was bitter but hot, and at that moment it seemed like the most delicious thing in the world. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I took it out and looked at the screen. A message from Carol, my accountant. She had stayed at the old office for a few more days to finish the financial reports. I opened the message and read, "Mia, urgent. Ralph is manipulating the reports again. He's inflating his department's profits and hiding expenses. We have proof. What do we do?" The smile disappeared from my face. I clutched my phone and looked at Tyler. He saw the look in my eyes and asked quietly, "What's wrong?" I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the phone screen, at those words that meant the war was far from over. I sent the report to the board of directors on Monday morning. 2 files, one with my figures, the other with my father's. Honest reporting versus manipulative reporting. I didn't write any comments or add any emotional accusations. Just numbers, documents, dates. Every expense item, every income indicator, every questionable transaction. Everything laid out side by side so it could be compared. Let them draw their own conclusions. The reaction came faster than I expected. On Wednesday, Walter Grimes, the chairman of the board, a man in his 60s with a gray beard and a habit of clearing his throat before every sentence, called me. "Mia, we've reviewed your materials. We have questions for Ralph." I didn't answer. I just listened, pressing the phone to my ear. "He's inflating his department's profits by about 15% every quarter. He's hiding supply costs and transferring them to shared items. Technically, it's not illegal, but corporate ethics have suffered. We'll call him in for the next meeting." "Thank you, Walter," I said quietly. I put down the phone and sat down at my desk. My hands were shaking. It was my move, the first in a series I had been planning for weeks. I knew I was doing the right thing, that this was the only way to protect myself and my team. But for some reason, I didn't feel satisfied, just emptiness spreading inside me like cold water. Tyler walked into the office with 2 cups of coffee. "How did it go?" "The board is asking questions. My father would be called to a meeting." He put the cup in front of me and sat down opposite me. "Are you sure you want to continue?" I looked at him. His face was serious, without a hint of condemnation or approval, just a question. "I have no choice." The next quarter, I sent another report. And another one 3 months later. Each time. The same figures, the same contrast. My reports were transparent, detailed, understandable. My father's, confusing, with numerous optimizations and strategic redistributions which hid the real costs. The board began to ask more and more questions. My father tried to justify himself, talking about cost optimization and strategic planning, but the numbers told a different story. I saw Walter Grimes frowning as he read my reports and other board members whispering among themselves. The phone call came at midnight on Friday. I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep after a difficult week, and when the phone screen suddenly lit up in the dark. "Dad" flashed on the display in large letters. I stared at the word for a long time. At this contact, I hadn't changed since I was a teenager. Before answering, "Hello? Are you trying to destroy me?" His voice was hoarse with rage, almost breaking on the high notes. "Do you understand what you're doing? Do you understand what's happening?" I sat down on the bed and pushed the blanket aside. Streetlights burned outside the window, illuminating the room with a dim yellow light. "Yes, I understand. I am your father. I created this company. I gave you everything, a job, opportunities, a future." "You gave me coldness," I replied calmly, "indifference, control, and when I tried to break free, when I wanted to breathe, you decided to destroy me." He was silent for a few seconds, breathing heavily into the phone. I could hear a clock ticking somewhere in the background. "I tried to teach you, to make you stronger, to prepare you for this world. No, you tried to break me, so that I would remain under your control forever, but it didn't work. Mia, and you don't understand. You started this war. You continued it even when I tried to negotiate. Now you're getting what you deserve." He hung up. The sharp beep in the silence seemed deafening. I sat in the dark, staring at the phone, and felt something inside me break completely. The connection between us, thin, almost imperceptible, but still there. Now it was broken. I put the phone on the nightstand and lay there, staring at the ceiling until morning. The next day, the real war began. It happened on Thursday, at 2:00 in the afternoon. I was holding a meeting with potential clients, a large supermarket chain that wanted to modernize their waste processing systems. It was an important contract worth $1.8 million over 2 years. 5 people in business attire were sitting around the table in our conference room when the door suddenly opened. 2 men entered. They were young, muscular, wearing tight jeans and bright T-shirts. One was holding a portable speaker that was blasting rhythmic, obscenely loud music. The other was smiling broadly and shouting, "Surprise for Mia Stedman, special delivery!" I froze. The clients turned around in surprise, and the men started dancing on striptease, right there in the conference room in the middle of the workday, under stunned gazes. Carol jumped out from behind her desk in the reception area, trying to stop them, but they just laughed and continued. One of the clients, an elderly woman in her 50s, blushed and tried not to look. The others sat with their mouths open, some laughing nervously. I stood up and looked coldly at the dancers. My blood was pounding in my temples, but I forced myself to speak calmly. "Who hired you?" They stopped dancing and looked at each other in surprise. The music was still playing. "Well, it's a surprise, lady." "Who hired you? Show me the order. Now." My tone brooked no argument. One of them took out his phone and, somewhat confused, showed me the screen with the order. I took a photo of it, enlarged the image, made sure all the details were legible, then pointed to the door. "Get out now or I'll call security." They took the speaker and left, muttering something about no sense of humor and ruined surprise. The door closed. I turned back to the customers, trying to remain calm, even though I was boiling inside. "I apologize for this completely unacceptable incident. It has nothing to do with our company. Shall we continue our discussion?" But the atmosphere was ruined. The meeting ended much sooner than planned, and the clients left with awkward, forced smiles and promises to get in touch. The contract fell through. I sat in my office staring at a photo of the order, payment card. Corporate Stedman, Industrial Division. The cardholder's name was not listed, but the account number was corporate. My father used company money for personal revenge. I sent a screenshot to Walter Grimm's with a short, businesslike message. "Ralph Stedman is using corporate funds for personal entertainment, aimed at sabotaging my negotiations. Evidence attached." The board of directors called an emergency meeting the next day. My father was called on the carpet. He tried to justify himself, saying that it was a silly joke, that he didn't think it would be taken so seriously, that someone could have used his card without permission. But using corporate funds for such antics was a direct violation of company policy. He was officially warned, and it was recorded in the minutes. But he didn't stop. The following month, we were working on a large contract with a plastic bottle factory. They wanted to install a new water purification system that would meet new environmental standards. The negotiations lasted 2 months. I personally visited the factory 3 times, spending days discussing the details with their engineers and developing customized solutions. A week before signing the contract, I received a call from the factory director, Damon Rich, a man in his mid-40s with a sharp voice. "Mia, I'm very sorry, but we have to withdraw from the cooperation." I froze, clutching the phone. "What? Why? We agreed on everything." "Technical problems have arisen. Your department was unable to guarantee the timely delivery of equipment. We have been informed that the delay could be up to 3 months. Damon, we guaranteed it. We have all the documents, confirmation from the suppliers." I have been told otherwise. Stedman Industrial Division has officially confirmed that the delivery will be delayed indefinitely. We need it now. We can't wait. Dad. Again. I spent 2 days gathering evidence. A correspondence with suppliers, phone records, internal documents on agreeing terms. Tyler helped me. We worked late into the night, checking every letter, every call. It turned out that the parent department, which was supposed to coordinate part of the delivery through joint contractors, was deliberately delaying the process. They sent Damon false information, claiming that the delay was on my side, that I couldn't fulfill my obligations. I sent Damon all the evidence, 30 pages of documents, letters, and confirmations. He called back an hour later, sounding guilty and confused. Mia, I didn't know. I'm so sorry. We were given false information. Let's start over. I'm ready to sign the contract. We signed the contract a week later, and my father received another official warning from the board, his second in 2 months. But the worst happened in March. I was in New York for negotiations with potential investors when Carol called me at 9 in the morning. Mia, Ralph has called an emergency board meeting. Right now. It starts in an hour. I was sitting in my hotel room on the 20th floor, looking out at Manhattan through the window. What? How could he? I wasn't even notified in advance. He said it was urgent. It concerns the reorganization of the company and the redistribution of powers. Reorganization. Without me. I understood what he had in mind. He wanted to push through the decision while I couldn't be there physically to influence the vote, to convince the board members. I had 1 hour. I sat looking out the window at the gray clouds over New York, at the anthill of streets below, and suddenly realized what I needed to do. Not fight on his turf, but create my own. I called Tyler. How many of the company's key managers are in town right now? Most of them. What happened? Organize an online seminar urgently, training on new environmental standards and innovative technologies. Invite all the top managers, all the leading engineers, everyone who has influence. Start in 2.5 hours. Mia, it's impossible to organize in such a short time. It is possible. You can do it. Do it, Tyler. Please. Tyler worked like crazy. In 2 hours, he created a presentation on the most relevant topics, sent out personal invitations, and organized an online platform with high-quality connectivity. I connected from my hotel room, set up my camera, checked the sound, and faces began to appear on the screen. Logistics managers, leading engineers, even a few members of the board of directors who were interested in innovation. My father's meeting began at 11 in the morning at the head office. 3 people showed up, 3 out of 20 invited. Walter Grims called my father right in the middle of the meeting. Ralph, where is everyone? We can't make any decisions without a quorum. This is not a legitimate meeting. My father sat in the empty conference room looking at the 3 faces across from him, a young lawyer and 2 junior managers, and realized he had lost. Everyone else was at my seminar. I found out about it from Carol that evening. She said he just got up and left the room without saying a word, without even officially closing the meeting. He just got up and left. That evening, when I returned from New York, Tyler came into my office. It was already 9 o'clock and the office was empty. I was sitting at my desk looking at financial reports, not noticing that tears were running down my cheeks, falling on the papers, blurring the numbers. He didn't ask any questions. He just sat down in the chair opposite me and remained silent. We sat like that for an hour, maybe more. He didn't try to comfort me, didn't say that everything would be fine, that I was doing well, that I would win. He just sat there, breathing evenly, occasionally turning the page of the report he was holding. And that helped more than any words could have. The letter arrived in April on a Wednesday morning, an official envelope with the company logo, the sender's address, Zurich, Switzerland. I opened it while standing at Carol's desk, tore the edge with trembling fingers, and read aloud. Mia, I'm tired of the constant complaints from the board of directors. Your war with Ralph is seriously damaging the company's reputation and effectiveness. I can no longer ignore it. I have made a decision. You will manage the branch in Portland, Oregon. Ralph will get Houston, Texas. 1 year. Based on your performance, I will make a final decision about the future of the company and your positions in it. Move in 2 weeks. Get ready, Alden Stedman. I read the letter a second time, trying to comprehend every word. A third time. Carol looked at me with horror and sympathy. Portland, but that's on the other side of the country. It's all over again. Another test. I whispered, folding the letter. I put it in my pocket, feeling the weight of the paper. Then I picked up the phone and called Tyler. He answered on the second ring. Pack your things, I said, looking out the window at the city I would have to leave. We're going to Portland. Portland greeted us with rain. Not a light spring shower, but a real downpour that drummed on the roof of the taxi and turned the streets into gray rivers. Tyler sat next to me, looking out the window at the unfamiliar city, while I clutched a folder with documents about the branch I would have to head. The building turned out to be old, 3 stories high, with peeling paint on the facade and a cracked sign. Inside, it smelled of dampness and something outdated. The office occupied the second floor, 22 workstations, half of which were empty. The people who worked there looked at me without any enthusiasm, skeptically, wearily, with an expression that said, "Another one from headquarters. She'll talk about changes and then go back." The first meeting took place on Monday morning. I stood in front of a team of 15 people, engineers, managers, an accountant, a secretary. Their average age was 45. They had been working here for decades, accustomed to the routine, to the fact that the branch was barely surviving, but no one was demanding results. "I'm Mia Stedman," I began, "and we're going to be working together for the next year. I know the branch has problems. Outdated equipment, low sales, customer churn, but we're going to change that." Silence. Then one of the men, about 50 years old with gray hair and a fleshy face, raised his hand. "Mrs. Stedman, we've been promised change 3 times in the last 5 years. Nothing has changed." "I don't make promises. I deliver," I replied. He smiled skeptically. The first 2 months were hell. The equipment was constantly breaking down. Old computers, printers that jammed every 10 pages, a ventilation system that hummed so loudly that we had to shout during phone calls. I submitted a request to upgrade the equipment, but the money was slow to come. The branch's budget was meager. The employees resisted every change. When I proposed a new customer accounting system, Senior Manager Harrison Kane said, "We've been working the old way for 20 years. Why change anything?" "Because the old way doesn't work," I replied. "Look at the numbers. We're losing customers every quarter." "Maybe the problem isn't the system, but the management," he replied coldly. I forced myself not to react emotionally. I just nodded and continued the meeting. But after it, Tyler quietly said to me, "He's your father's friend. I checked his social media profile. They're in the golf club together." Of course. My father couldn't help but stick his nose in, even from thousands of miles away. Over the next few weeks, Harrison sabotaged my every decision. He forgot to pass on important messages to clients, accidentally deleted files, and spread rumors among the team that I was incompetent. I tried to talk to him, explain, convince him. It was useless. One morning, I came to the office and found out that an important contract we had been working on for a month had fallen through. The client said he didn't receive the final commercial proposal on time. I checked. The document was ready. I personally gave it to Harrison to send. He forgot. I called him into my office. He sat with his arms crossed with an expression of dismissive confidence. "Harrison, why didn't you send the documents?" "I forgot." "I'm sorry. This is the 4th time this month. Do you realize that we are losing money because of this?" He shrugged. "Mistakes happen." I looked at him, at his smug face, and suddenly realized that talking wouldn't help. Never. He's not going to change. He's here to undermine me. "You're fired," I said quietly. He raised his eyebrows in surprise. "What?" "You're fired, effective today. You'll receive severance pay in accordance with your employment contract. Pack your things." His face flushed. "You can't fire me. I've been working here for 18 years. I can, and I am. Systematic sabotage of work processes is grounds for immediate dismissal. If you have any questions, contact the legal department." He stood up and leaned across the table. "Your father will find out about this." "Sure, but the decision has been made." He left, slamming the door behind him. I sat there staring at the closed door, my hands shaking. I had never fired anyone before. It was harsh, unpleasant, and I felt like I had done something terrible. But at the same time, I felt relieved. Tyler came in 10 minutes later. "You did it," he said. "Yes. How do you feel?" "I don't know. Bad and good at the same time." He sat down across from me. You did the right thing. He was destroying everything you were trying to build." I nodded, not trusting my voice. After Harrison was fired, the atmosphere in the office changed. At first, people were shocked, then cautiously approving. One of the engineers, Sarah Lindstrom, a woman in her mid-30s with a short haircut, approached me after the meeting. "Mia, I want to say, he deserved it. He's been holding everything back here for years. No one dared to do anything." "Thank you, Sarah. I believe in you. We can do this." Those were the first words of support I had received in months. For the next 6 months, we worked like crazy. I applied for a grant to upgrade the equipment, spending my evenings writing justifications and gathering documents. We received approval 2 months later. New computers, modern printers, an updated ventilation system. The office began to look like a real workplace, not a warehouse for old things. I personally met with every potential client within a 200-kilometer radius. I visited plants, factories, and processing complexes. I offered eco-friendly solutions that saved them money and met the new standards. Gradually, contracts started coming in, small ones at first, then bigger ones. The team, changed people who were used to just sitting out the workday, either adapted or left. We hired 3 new engineers, young, energetic. Sarah Lindstrom became my right-hand woman, managing technical projects with an enthusiasm I had never seen before in Portland. I learned to be tougher, to say no loudly and confidently, to make unpopular decisions without waiting for approval, to stand my ground even when everyone else had doubts. I was no longer the quiet girl who agreed with everything to avoid conflict. Tyler was there every day. He streamlined processes, trained staff, and worked on technical documentation late into the night. We often stayed behind in the office when everyone else had left, sitting at neighboring desks, immersed in our work. Sometimes he brought coffee, sometimes I brought pizza from delivery. We hardly talked about personal stuff, but his presence was like an anchor. I heard almost nothing about my father. Quarterly corporate reports came in. His branch in Houston was showing unstable results. Sometimes there was slight growth, sometimes a decline. I didn't call him, he didn't call me. We existed in parallel worlds, connected only by official documents. Somewhere around the 8th month, something changed between Tyler and me. We were working on a particularly difficult project. A large factory wanted to completely overhaul its water supply system. The technical challenges were enormous. The deadlines were tight. We sat in the office until 3 in the morning, poring over blueprints, calculating, arguing about details. When we finally finished, I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. "We did it," I whispered. "You did it," Tyler replied. I opened my eyes and looked at him. He was sitting across from me, looking at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. And then he leaned over and kissed me. It was unexpected, soft, careful. I didn't push him away. I just responded to the kiss, feeling something inside melt, something that had been frozen for a very long time. We didn't discuss it. We didn't talk about feelings, about the future, about what it meant. We just accepted it as a fact. Sometimes he stayed at my apartment. Sometimes I stayed at his. We didn't advertise our relationship at the office, but we didn't hide it either. It was our little island of calm amid the chaos. He didn't try to save or fix me. He was just there when things were difficult, silent when he needed to be silent, and talking when he needed to talk. It wasn't the kind of love you see in novels, stormy and dramatic. It was a deep understanding, a calmness I had never felt before. The year passed unexpectedly. I couldn't believe it when the calendar showed April again. It seemed like I had been in Portland forever, and at the same time, only a moment. The report arrived by email, an official document from my grandfather with the results for the year. I opened it while sitting in my office, Tyler standing behind me. Portland branch, 38% profit growth, 100% equipment upgrades, 52% increase in customer base, 88% staff satisfaction. Houston branch, 22% decline in profits, loss of key customers, 45% staff turnover, I read the numbers, and inside I felt a strange calm. I had won. But there was another section of the report. The head office, the old branches, clear flow division, which I had left a year ago. First a 12% decline immediately after my departure, then a sharp increase. The team I had nurtured, trained, and inspired had worked independently. They hadn't just survived without me. They had thrived. 26% growth in a year. And Stedman Industrial Division, the parent division. Stable performance for the first 6 months, then a gradual slowdown. Without my pressure, without competition, it relaxed. Humpsier profits are holding steady, but not growing. Stagnation. I reread the numbers, trying to comprehend. I didn't just win. I created something that lives without me, a team, a system, a culture. The phone rang, unknown number, international code. I answered. Mea. The voice was old, hoarse but commanding. Grandpa. I heard him for the first time in many years. Grandpa, come back. The headquarters is yours. I'm stepping down, gradually, over the next few years, but you are my successor. You've proven that you can not only manage, but also build. Your father is staying in Houston. Let him clean up the mess he made. If he succeeds, he'll get the branch for good. If not, he will be replaced. I listened, pressing the phone to my ear so hard that it dug into my skin. And then suddenly I felt something rise in my throat, choking me and tears streaming down my cheeks. Mia, are you there? Grandpa's voice softened. Yes, I'm here. You did it. I'm proud of you. He hung up. I sat there holding the phone, tears streaming down my face. Tyler hugged me from behind, pulling me close. I turned around and buried my face in his shoulder. I won, I whispered. I won, Tyler. Why am I not happy? He stroked my hair and said nothing. He knew. Winning against my father was not a triumph. It was a loss. Final. Irreversible. I proved that I was better than him, but the price was our relationship, however broken it had been before. We sat there for a long time, until the tears dried and our breathing steadied. Outside the window, Portland was once again covered in rain. The return to headquarters took place in June, when the city was already sweltering and the air felt thick and heavy. I stood in front of the building, looking at the familiar facade, and felt a strange sense of duality. It was as if I had been here yesterday, and at the same time, as if an eternity had passed. The board of directors held an official meeting, a large conference room, 20 people at the table. Walter Grimes at the head. When I entered, everyone stood up and began to applaud. The sound of applause echoed off the walls, and I stood there not knowing what to do with my hands, how to react, smile, nod. I just thanked them and sat down in my seat. Walter gave a speech about my achievements, about how I had revived the Portland branch, about my exceptional leadership. The words were correct, solemn, but they slipped past me. I looked at the faces around me, approving, smiling, interested. But inside there was emptiness. I had won the war. But what exactly had I won? After the meeting, people came up to me, shook my hand, and congratulated me. Someone mentioned how I had shown character. Someone smiled and said that now the company has a real leader. I thanked them, smiled, and played the role they expected of me. Tyler stood to the side watching. When everyone had left, he approached me. How are you feeling? I don't know. Strange, somehow. He nodded without saying anything. He understood. My new office used to belong to my grandfather. It was large, with panoramic windows overlooking the city, a massive wooden desk, and bookshelves along the walls. I went in there for the first time the next day, put my box of belongings on the floor, and stood by the window for a long time, looking at the horizon. My grandfather remained an official advisor, but in fact, he handed over all authority to me. He would show up at the office once every 2 weeks, discuss strategic issues, and then disappear. He spent most of his time at home preparing for his final return to Switzerland. I spent the first few months reorganizing. I combined the best practices from both departments, Clearflow's environmental solutions with Stedman Industrial's proven methods. I called meetings, discussed with the teams, listened to suggestions. It was a difficult process, full of arguments and compromises, but gradually, everything fell into place. The team I left a year ago at Clearflow Division welcomed me back warmly. Sarah from Portland moved with me and became the chief engineer of the combined department. The others, those I had trained, inspired, and nurtured, were happy. But they no longer needed me every minute of the day. They had become independent, confident, strong. That was good, and a little sad. I hadn't heard from my father in a long time. Not a single call, not a single letter. Once a month, reports came from Houston. Dry, formal, without a single personal word. Numbers, dates, signatures. His branch was slowly recovering, but progress was minimal. He was staying afloat, but nothing more. 3 months after my return, I plucked up the courage to call him. I listened to the dial tone for a long time. Then the call was dropped. I tried again the next day. Same thing. I wrote an email. "Dad, I'd like to talk. Can we meet, or at least talk on the phone, please?" Mia. There was no reply. I realized he would never forgive me. For him, I had become a traitor, an enemy, the one who took away everything he had built. It didn't matter that he had started this war, that he had tried to destroy me. In his worldview, I was to blame, and I would have to live with that. One Saturday morning, when the office was almost empty, I decided to sort through the old archives in the office. Grandpa left behind a lot of things. Folders with documents, books, personal notes. I was going through the papers when I came across an old box of photographs. They were black and white, yellowed with worn edges. Grandpa was young, about 30, standing in front of the company's first building, a small one-story structure. Next to him was my father, very young, about 15, in a formal suit with a serious expression on his face. The other photos showed year after year. My father is growing older, but his face remains unchanged, serious and tense. And then I found a photo that made me freeze. I'm about 3 years old. I am sitting on my father's hands. He is smiling, broadly, sincerely, truly happily. I am holding a toy, some kind of stuffed animal, and laughing, and he looks at me with such an expression of love. It was love, pure, unconditional. I didn't remember him like that. I didn't remember him at all. I sat down on the floor among the boxes and photographs, holding this picture, and suddenly I understood everything. He was also a victim. His grandfather raised him as coldly and cruelly as my father later raised me. This system broke every generation, turning people into machines that knew only about money, control, and competition. My father didn't know any other way. He was never taught to love, support, or trust. He was taught to survive, dominate, and not show weakness. That didn't excuse him. Not at all. He was an adult. He could have changed. He could have chosen a different path. But it explained it. I cried. Sitting on the floor among old papers, clutching a photograph of a little girl and her father, who once knew how to smile, Tyler found me there an hour later. He hugged me without asking any questions, and we just sat there in silence. Months passed. The company was thriving. I was implementing new technologies, expanding markets, building a team. The board approved all my decisions, and my grandfather nodded with satisfaction. Outwardly, everything looked perfect, but inside, I was lonely. Tyler was there, as always. We were still together, living in the same apartment, working in the same office, but something had changed. We both felt it, even though we didn't say it out loud. Our relationship was born out of struggle, out of chaos, out of a shared war, and now the war was over. And suddenly, we were two people who didn't know each other very well outside of that struggle. One evening, sitting on the balcony with a glass of wine, he said, "We're not right for each other, are we?" I was silent for a long time, looking at the city below. We were right for each other back then, when everything was difficult. But now we're just a habit to each other." I nodded. It was sad but honest. "I don't regret it," I said quietly. "You saved me back then. You were what kept me afloat." "And you kept me afloat. But this isn't love for life, me." We parted quietly, without scandal or drama. He moved into his own apartment, and we remained colleagues, even friends, but no longer a couple. And that was right. Grandpa called me to his house in October. He lived in a small house on the outskirts of town, cluttered with books and old documents. We sat on the terrace, drank tea, and looked at the garden. "I'm going back to Switzerland next month," he said. "For good this time." I nodded. "The company is yours, me. Officially, legally, in fact. You did better than I expected." "Thank you." He looked at me intently. "You are stronger than me, and smarter than your father. But don't repeat our mistakes." "What mistakes?" "The company is not the goal. It's just a tool. A means to an end, not the end itself. Wisdom sometimes comes only with age. So, I realized this too late. Your father didn't realize it at all. He seems to be just as stubborn and thick-headed as I used to be. Don't lose this chance." I listened, holding the cup in my hands. "I broke my son," he continued quietly. "I tried to make him strong, but I made him cold. And he did the same to you. Break this chain, me. Promise me." "I promise," I whispered. He died a year after returning to Switzerland, peacefully, in his sleep. I didn't have time to say goodbye. December came unexpectedly quickly. I stood on the roof of the headquarters, my favorite place lately. From here, the city seemed like a toy, controllable, understandable. The wind was cold, but I didn't feel it. I just looked at the horizon, and my hand instinctively fell on my stomach. 3 months. The doctor confirmed it a week ago. A baby. My baby. Tyler knew. He was the first to find out. But even with the wedding, we're unlikely to change that much. Maybe over the years, who knows? My phone vibrated in my pocket. I took it out and looked at the screen. A message from a number saved as Dad. I stared at that word for a long time before opening it. "The Houston branch is returning to growth. The numbers have stabilized. Maybe we can talk sometime. Ralph. Maybe. Someday." Cautious, uncertain words. But they were there. I didn't reply right away. I just stared at the screen, feeling tears running down my cheeks. From the wind or from emotion, I don't know. I smiled through my tears and whispered to myself, maybe. My hand fell back on my stomach. I stood on the roof, looked at the city, and thought about the future. About the child who would be born in the spring. About the father who might one day become a grandfather. About how I would break this chain of coldness and control. My child would not grow up in that same cold house. It won't measure its worth by numbers in reports. It won't fear parental approval because it will receive it unconditionally. I won't be a perfect mother. I'm sure I'll make many mistakes. But I will love, simply, sincerely, unconditionally. And that is already a victory. My family's history was a history of wars, between generations, between parents and children, between pride and love. I won my war, but I paid for it with scars that will never completely disappear. I learned to live with them. I learned not to forgive my father completely, but to understand him. I learned not to expect him to change, but to leave the door open. The company was thriving. I was successful, respected, strong. But my most important victory was not in the numbers on the reports. It was in the future, in the fact that I would stop this cycle. I stood on the roof, my hand on my stomach, looking at the city and whispering to my unborn child, "You will have love, I promise. No matter what happens, you will be loved." The wind picked up, and I turned to the door leading downstairs. Life went on, work, challenges, difficulties. But now I had a reason greater than any company. I had a chance to make everything right, and I wasn't going to waste it. My phone vibrated again. I looked at it. A message from Sarah. New contract signed. Shall we celebrate today? I smiled and typed a reply. Let's celebrate, but I'll have juice, not wine. She sent a smiley face and a question. Is there something I should know? You'll find out soon, I promise. I went downstairs to the warm office, to my team, to my life. The scars remained. My father was still far away, silent, unreachable, but the door was open. Maybe someday he would come in. Maybe someday he would meet his granddaughter or grandson. Maybe. And that maybe was enough to keep on living. That hope was mine.